At the very heart of our core values and expectations at Tagar State College is our beliefs regarding inclusivity and ensuring in practice that these are modeled for our students, staff, and the wider community. These standards of practice include creating and maintaining a safe and supportive school environment, knowing our students and how they learn, delivering curriculum content which is explicit and differentiated for all students, and creating a culture of high expectations, nurturing our students' self-belief. Our wraparound model of support views our students holistically, utilizing internal and external supports to ensure that all our students are able to access and participate in the core curriculum every day in every lesson throughout the school year. We provide multiple opportunities and ways to learn and take into consideration our students' strengths, interests, and learning abilities, prior knowledge, and ways they learn best. When reflecting on the inclusivity of your teaching practices, there are 11 key components to consider. Let's explore what these look like, sound like, and feel like in your classroom and throughout your school community.
Pre-planning information. Have you been given information on the nature and degree of learning difficulties or impairment and the access needs of the vulnerable learners in the class? Have you been shown, or do you know how these learners' access needs and personal care needs will be met in the class? Do you know where to seek advice if you don't know how learners' needs will or can be met?
As a class teacher, if I have a concern about a child in my class, I can use one school as a first point of call to mine for information about what's happened in the past with a student and if there have been any concerns raised previously. So the first thing I'll do is search for the student's profile, and then in the additional information section I can see that there's a current medical condition, an AIMS record, so a case record, complex case record, personalised learning, and DDA disability. So that tells me I can look at one school for more information. I'm going to the support tab first, and I can see that there's some information in the personalised learning section about this child and his needs. I can see that in the past semester he was on an individual curriculum plan. There's some recorded healthcare needs and support provisions that talk about access. So that gives me quite a lot of information. But I can also talk to the class teacher from the previous year, and I can ask guidance officers for files or speech pathologists, or I could look in the student folio for more information.
What preparation have you made with the class for one-to-one peer support, collaborative teaming, group work, valuing difference of race, gender, ethnicity, disability, age or religion? How do you ensure that mutual respect is encouraged within your classroom? Are you clear about how to deal with bullying and harassment in the class? Does the school have a consistent bullying policy?
The way I see my practice is, as teachers we have curriculum, and in the classroom we have children. And I think we always have to remember that this curriculum sits there, but what our focus is the children. And every single one of those children sits somewhere on a continuum with curriculum. So the very first thing we need to make sure we do is make sure that every child feels safe and secure in that classroom, that they feel confident, that they feel brave, that they feel willing to have a go. And when we establish that kind of classroom environment, as teachers we look at where they fit on this curriculum. And being a curriculum, I mean, it says this is a Year 2 level, this is a Year 3 level, but really every one of those children sits somewhere on there with everything that they do. So for me, inclusivity is really understanding that you are dealing with individual children in your classroom. So I like my planning, I like to do an individual plan for every single child. When I set it up at the beginning of the year, it's a bit of a nuisance, but it helps me and my teaching partner, my EA, have a look at where each of those children might be in any place. For instance, at the moment we're making sure that they really have solid foundation of 2-digit numbers and they really know the difference between their teen numbers and their teen numbers. So as I do it as a whole class, my EA might be individually just checking in with different children, and she'll record what's happened, and at the end of a fortnight's run I have a look at that and I say, yeah, well they look like they've got it now, and we can move on to the next task with them, but the kids that don't have it, we keep on going. So as far as I look at it, every single one of those children needs an individual plan. So that's the way I generally plan for learning. I have a couple of children, one in particular, one child in my class that because of medical reasons has missed an enormous amount of school. So she's on an ICP, so she has her own individual little book where we look at where she is and what she needs to do next. And because she misses blocks of learning, we have to make sure that when she comes back that she's included in the class, wherever she is. We have children that have English as a second. Most of our children have English as a second background. Some of those children exclusively speak Yumpa talk and you can see that it takes them a lot of cognitive effort to work out what it is you're saying and how they might answer back. So making sure that you take the time to wait and listen and make sure that every one of those children at some time has a go of negotiating language in the classroom during the day, being absolutely mindful that they are working really hard to work in an English environment.
Lesson planning. How will you support the needs of all learners? Consider timing, variation of activities, types of activities, reinforcement of key ideas, extension work, recall of previous work, links to future work, and clear instructions. Will the content of the lesson engage all learners from the beginning? Will there be sufficient variation in activities and pace to engage all? Are you able to access specially adapted equipment for some learners to enable them to participate fully? If not, can an alternative way be found? Will diversified and differentiated work allow all learners to experience success at their optimum level?
This is a planning session for us to demonstrate how we would do weekly planning to include a child with a disability in the whole class planning.
Today we have Zoe, myself, Tammy as a class teacher, and Miss Pearl. This week we're looking at using the 4 operation with pairs of odd and even numbers, or 1 odd and 1 even number. Then using the relationship established to check the accuracy of calculations. Miss Zoe, this is what we're teaching today. This week we're looking at place value. Is there a way we can simplify this to suit Charlie's ability?
So Charlie has some goals around number that can align, odd and even numbers. So he's got some goals around skip counting, so counting by 2s and 5s. So it's similar but different. So possibly he could be working on those things while the rest of the class is doing that work. And we might be able to use Miss Pearl to develop some maybe some number charts, and during her time in the class she could be doing that work with Charlie.
One thing that we have to look at is sometimes you can't remember. You have to repeat every time.
Okay.
Like each time, so it needs repetitive things.
Mm-hmm.
Like every day, every lesson, when it comes to numbers. Well, not only numbers, with all the other key learning areas.
Okay, so maybe we can look at Miss Pearl doing some of that repetitive work again and again, and maybe we could work together to develop some consolidations to help move that knowledge, those concepts, into long-term memory.
What different teaching enhancements are you going to use? Visual, example, use photos, mind maps, maps and diagrams, pictures, film clips, digital cameras, wall displays. Auditory, example, use storytelling, talking, effective questions, problem solving, clear sequencing, music, singing. Kinesthetic, example, use movement, role play, artifacts, contact with the environment.
This is the next thing we're going to do when we make sugar. We're going to store the raw sugar. Remember when we saw the movie of the mill?
Preparing materials. Are written materials accessible to all? Formats, readability, length, content. Scaffolding. Example, writing frames, pictograms, sounds, pictures, objects, artifacts, word lists, number lines, etc. Are scaffolds accessible to all? Appropriate use of augmentative communication and ICT. Self-presentation. Have you thought about how you will react to situations of stress, humour, seriousness and embarrassing questions? Offer encouragement to all. Challenge the behaviour, not the learner. Are all learners aware that you might approach the behaviour of some students in a different manner from the rest of the class? How will you use your voice in the lesson? For example, volume, tone, and make sure that all children are understanding you. Where will you position yourself in the classroom and when? Whom will you question and when?
This is what we did next. We deliver the K. Have a think about it. You might look on the board. Deliver the K. How did we end that one? I hope Majuro is thinking about it. In a. Oh, you use that good word large. Is there? In a large shed. That's a good word.
Use of support staff. Have you met with or at least communicated with support staff before the lesson? How are you going to use other support in the lesson? Does their use allow all learners to be equally included in the class activities? If you are using support staff for withdrawal, how do you know the learners are gaining from this? If you are using withdrawal, how are the groups organised?
They work together. Like we did yesterday.
Classroom organisation. Is seating carefully planned and or the activity accessible for students with mobility impairments? For example, circulation space, table height. Hearing impairments. For example, sight line for lip reading, interpreter, no glare. Visually impaired. Example, maximise residual sight. If touch, can they reach? Challenging behaviour, for example, in adult gaze, at front for eye contact. Short attention span, easily distracted, example, sit on own. Learning difficulties, who need a lot of support, for example, next to peer supporter. Short attention span, example, distraction-free zone. What seating plans are you using and why? Will seating plans allow for use of peer support and how?
Because I have a reasonably small classroom and I do have 25 kids, and before they organised that, there were 29 in the classroom. So early on I made a decision that I wouldn't have one child, one desk sitting and looking at the board. So the way I organise my classroom is that I have a mat area in front of the whiteboard, and we do a lot of whole group work, circle time work on that carpet. And then when they break out to do their individual work, or we work in groups, I will do my work on the carpet with the group, and children have a choice. They either get they go and find a space at a desk, and the desks are arranged in different places. So some children may choose to work individually, so I have desks against the wall and children will choose to do that. I have a couple of desks in groups where they work together, and in fact I don't have my own desk in the classroom. I have a table and it has adult chairs around it, and some children like to sit there. And then some children will choose to work on the floor. I have a couple of expectations. They're not allowed to lie on the floor. They have to, have their body nice and straight. They have to be in a learning position, but some children would prefer to work on the floor. So they have a choice about where they go, and you'll see that at different times children will make different choices. And because they've made that choice, if I find children chatting, it's easy to remind them, say, you need to make a choice about where you learn best. And I find that they will. They'll get up and they'll move somewhere else and realise that their job is to learn. So it's a negotiated learning space, and I'm finding it's working very well.
How will you organise and group learners in lessons? Friendship groupings? Mixed gender, same gender groupings? Mixed ability, same ability groupings? Specific pairs of learners working together? For example, stronger reader with a weaker reader? Learners with or without vulnerabilities?
Reading is a particular focus at TAGI and in our classroom as well. So at the beginning of the year, I made sure that I had a conversation and that I had actually read with each of those children before we organise them into groups. Although we have data from the previous year, I think it's really important to have that one-on-one conversation. It's important to actually listen to the children read yourself, so you can get an idea of what they're doing, whether they're decoding, whether they're self-questioning, whether they're looking for deeper meaning. And after I did that, that's when I set up my reading groups. And I do it not so much on the basis of what reading level they're at, although that's important, but looking at the skills they have. Some children, need help with fluency. So grouping those children together really helps you focus on that skill. Some children were reading really well, but their comprehension showed that they weren't reading for deeper meaning. So working with those children in a group helps you focus on those strategies for comprehension. And then there are groups of children that are still decoding words, still reading at a word level. Putting those kids together and starting to unpack text so that they pre-read, they use their prior knowledge, they build up some vocabulary just to help them read those texts. So reading is a particular focus, and reading, it's important to look at children in groups in that situation so you can focus on those skills.